Hey football fans, welcome back to the Pigskin Prodigies Podcast, where we talk all things Green Bay Packers, NFL, and NFL Draft. I'm your host, Dan Wuso, and I'm joined, as always, by Kevin Bargender, and we have a whole lot to discuss today. With the 2023 NFL season coming up, there's a lot to unpack, and we're just going to start off big with one of the biggest stories that's been surrounding the Green Bay Packers this offseason, and that is first-year starting quarterback Jordan Love and expectations for him this season. So, Kevin, I want to give you the floor first to talk about this. What are your expectations for Jordan Love this season? Obviously, we haven't seen much of him so far in his career in meaningful NFL games because he's only started one game, and then he played in mop duty versus the Philadelphia Eagles last year. Looked pretty good in that game in the quarter. I think he went like 6 for 9 for 113 passing yards and a touchdown. But obviously, probably can't really project a career or like a season of success just from that one little stretch of a game that he played in. So I guess, going forward, like, what are your expectations for him in 2023, knowing what you know about him so far?
Yeah, and first off, it's great to have the podcast and everything back. We haven't done this in a while, so it's been fun to get back in the saddle in a way. But yeah, my expectations are a little bit higher. If you would ask me that last year, I would have said I don't have any confidence in Jordan Love, and I don't think he's the quarterback of the future. Then he goes in against the Eagles last year and looks very efficient and looks pretty good against one of the best teams. Well, in the best team in the NFC and almost a Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. I was really encouraged by that performance, and I thought, wow, we might actually have something here. It might not just be, a flash in the pan or a high upside guy anymore. He does look like he has progressed. And frankly, in a weird way, he actually looked like he actually played better in his limited action in that game than Aaron Rodgers. It was like, whoa, if Love would have played this whole game, we might actually be winning or might have won the game. You never know. It was kind of like a deja vu back to the Cowboys-Packers game where Favre went down and Rodgers went in and almost led a comeback victory. Love did a similar thing. It wasn't nearly as close at the end, but he came in and ran the offense the way it should be run. And maybe that's all the Packers need on offense is just someone to actually run what Matt LaFleur wants them to do. So I've got pretty high expectations this year, and I think he's ready. It's been 3 years. This is his 4th year now. It's kind of do or die. Either you're ready at this point or you're probably never going to be ready. I know he's still kind of a rookie in a way because he hasn't really got much playing time, but he's had plenty of time to sit behind Rodgers and learn a ton from him and get a lot of the practice reps and snaps in the off season, in OTAs and in mini camp with Rodgers usually sitting out. So there's really no excuses, I don't think, anymore. It's kind of, if he's bad this year, I would be pretty surprised. And I think that would probably be a signal that you need to kind of look to the 2024 draft for a quarterback, because if the guy can't develop in 4 years, I don't know. I don't know how many more years he needs usually. I mean, most quarterbacks can kind of figure it out in that time frame. I don't know if a 5th year would be very beneficial, but my expectations are pretty high. Not as high as they were with Rodgers, but they're up there.
Yeah, I would say my expectations for Jordan Love this season are pretty moderate. I think definitely after seeing how he played last year against Philadelphia, that kind of made me feel a little more confident in him, gave me a little more faith. Obviously, like you said, he has been in this offense for 3 years now, for 4 off seasons too. So you expect him to be comfortable. You expect him to know what's going on and not look out of place at this point. Obviously, if he struggles to know the offense at this point this season, you're gonna wonder, is he really the quarterback of the future? But yeah, I think he'll have a solid season. He'll probably be up and down just because he hasn't really played in actual NFL games, really, besides the one against the Kansas City Chiefs, I think a couple years ago when Rodgers was out, and then the last game against the Eagles last year. So not a lot of game experience. He's going to have some ups and downs. There's going to be some rough patches probably, but I do think he'll show some promise this year and lead the Packers to an okay record, probably at least make them competitive this year. But I guess going along with that other question about expectations for Jordan Love this year, what would he have to do this year? I guess first, what would you consider to be a good season for him, like statistically this year? And like, what would he have to do this year to make you feel like he's the quarterback of the future or has a chance to be that?
Yeah, I would say it would be great to have 25 touchdowns, something over 20, I guess, would be good. And then keep the interceptions below, I would say 11 or 12. Keep a 2-to-1 touchdown ratio. I would be okay with that. Throw for, try to, get a couple thousand, or I shouldn't say a couple thousand, 3,000 to 4,000 yards passing would be great. I don't expect him to throw for like 5,000 yards or anything like that, like Rodgers did a few times. But I really think that he's got a really high ceiling, and he was kind of the boomer bust quarterback of his draft class. So, yeah, I think if he can do 3,500 yards, 20 to 25 touchdowns, and under 12 interceptions, I think the Packers are a pretty good year, and he can at least be a good game manager, like an Alex Smith was, or Jimmy Garoppolo is. So even that would be just good enough even to get them into the playoffs, I think, and at least give us something to build on and say, okay, he did good this year, but maybe he can do even better next year. I think that would give him another year in at least the Packers fans' minds, and I think management would feel good about letting him play out that contract and maybe even giving him a longer contract if he plays really at least decently next year.
Yeah, I think we're kind of on the same wavelength there. I was thinking like 25 touchdowns, about probably around 12 interceptions or less as well. Maybe like 4,000 passing yards and like over 63% completion percentage. And if he's averaging like over 7 yards per attempt, if he can hit like at least 63% of his passes, I think that would be a pretty solid season for him, and enough to like convince me that he deserves a chance at least next year to show that he's the quarterback of the future. But getting into our next topic here, let's talk Packers breakout players. Who do you think will break out for the Packers this year and really be their next like good player, hopefully going forward?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to stick with the receivers on this one. I know Christian Watson sort of broke out last year. He didn't break out the entire year, so
I'll allow it.
Yeah. It was kind of like the second half of the year he sort of broke out, but I think this year he could break out in a bigger way and be consistent and be healthy for the entire year. I hope so, at least. But I just saw from the flashes that he seemed like the more higher potential guy than Romeo Doubs, though Romeo Doubs looked good too when he was healthy in the beginning of the season. I just feel like he's not a guy that's going to take over and be the number one guy, even though if he is a favorite target of Jordan Love. I feel like Christian Watson has the higher ceiling just because he can do jet sweeps. He could probably even do some wildcat things, I'm assuming, if they wanted him to do that. He's got so much speed that once he even gets an angle on someone, he's gone. So you can throw deep to him, you can throw short to him, you can hand it off to him. You can basically do anything. Even I think in the beginning of last year, they were doing kind of some snaps where he would run across the field, Rodgers would catch it, and then kind of pitch it forward to him, and then he would catch the pitch and then run around and get some yards or a touchdown. He's just extremely versatile, and it would actually be kind of cool to see him on kick returns, if I'm being honest. I know that's Keyshawn Nixon's role, but it would be great to see him on that role as well, just because of his long speed is just fantastic. But we probably don't want to do that just because of the injury risk, and he's one of our best receivers, which is strange to say. In only his second year, he's one of our best receivers because we just don't have anyone else on the roster that's proven. So he's basically our number one in his second year, and I don't remember ever saying that about a Packers receiver, like, oh wow, going into year two, they're the number one receiver. It just doesn't happen much. So this is kind of a rare opportunity for him to very early in his career make the most out of this opportunity and be a really good player for them and hopefully be a dominant player for them. So he's my kind of, I sort of cheated by looking at last year, but I think he can really break out. I think that was just the beginning of the breakout, but this year could be the real breakout, barring any significant injuries or setbacks. But I think, I think he'll be able to hopefully be a little healthier than last year. It just seemed like almost every week he was going down with something, but he seemed like he was able to bounce back and come back from it. But yeah, just absolutely love him as a player, and a lot more excited about him now than I was him coming out of college. So I'm going with him.
Yeah, Christian Watson, he definitely had some breakout games last season, and I kind of thought you were going to pick him. He just kind of seemed like the easy choice for that prediction, I guess. But because of that, I want to go a different direction, and I'm going to go with Devontae Wyatt, the defensive lineman, first-round pick from Georgia a couple seasons ago. I think that the opportunity is definitely there for him. Obviously, the Packers are very, very young in their defensive line group this year. Their only veteran really is Kenny Clark, who's going into his 8th season. Everyone else is like rookie or like first year or second year player, I mean. So there's a lot of guys that weren't even on the team last year in that group too. So I think as a returning player and basically probably the second most talented defensive lineman in that group, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for him. And he's just like a very, very talented athlete, ridiculous athlete. Ran a 4.77 40-yard dash at the combine. So he's got all the talent in the world. He's just got to put it together this season, and he'll have the opportunity to do that and show what he's capable of. So that's my choice for Packers breakout player this year. But getting into our next topic, looking at the rookie class, the Packers added 13 players from the 2023 NFL draft to their roster this season. So definitely you're going to see some contributions from some of those guys for sure. But which one, if you had to pick one of those players from this rookie class, which one do you think will make the biggest impact in 2023?
Yeah, it's really hard because they drafted a lot for depth this year. So it wasn't like, other than tight end, that was basically the only position that they really drafted for a starter. So mine, and it's hard because there's two of them they drafted back to back. So I'm just going to go the easy route with Anders Carlson from Auburn. I know some fans hate him, some fans absolutely love him. They think we need to get younger as a team, and they think that he can be just like his brother, who was with the Vikings and now with Raiders. So I'm going to go with him. I just think that he's got the big leg. If he can just be healthier than he was in college and work well with the special teams coordinator who was in with the Raiders before. So I'm pretty excited for him, and hopefully he'll be a little bit more healthy and have a stronger leg than Crosby did. Crosby towards the end seemed like he was sort of falling off a little bit, and you just never knew if he was even going to play each week. It was like, well, we might have to have a reserve kicker on the roster just in case he's not able to do this week, or we'll have the punter or the reserve kick off for us to kind of rest his leg. That way he's not, kicking twice as many balls per game, and we can just save him just for extra points and field goals. I kind of don't want to go down that route again. I really would prefer to go with one kicker all year long. And I think we should be able to do that with Anders. Now, Crosby's still out there in free agency. He hasn't been picked up by anybody, but it just seems like that ship has sailed. I believe he sold his house in Green Bay, and his wife said kind of goodbye to everybody. So it seems like that's not an option to come back, unfortunately. But I feel good about Anders Carlson. I liked him in college, like everything his brother has done. Daniel with Raiders, and even had him in fantasy a few years. He's been very solid kicker each week, and hopefully his brother can be at least close to that. We should have a very quality kicker in the 6th round, and so I feel good about that, pretty safe about that. I could be wrong, and rookies do struggle at kicker on occasion. The draft hasn't been the most fruitful of a place to get rookie kickers that are come in and play very well right away. But when the Packers do draft kickers, they typically hit. So I feel pretty good about this and pretty safe that taking Anders. I would assume there's no way he can't be the most impactful rookie because he will be kicking off, he will be kicking field goals, extra points, everything. So he'll be on the field probably a lot. I'm assuming, depending on if we're kicking field goals or, maybe we are punching in for touchdowns, but I would assume that he's going to make a pretty big impact on the team this year. And there's no real question if he's going to be the starter versus you could kind of say, well, the tight ends, there's a little bit of a question who's still going to be the starter, but there's really no question. There's no other kicker on the roster. So this is a pretty slam dunk one for me.
Yeah, it's a very logical choice because he's not going to have somebody breathing down his neck in the kicker room. So, and he has the clearest path to playing time. So that makes a ton of sense to me. I know. So I'm going to take it a different direction. I'm going to go with rookie tight end, second round pick out of Oregon State, Luke Musgrave. Obviously, that tight end room, there's more competition there. He's got to beat out Josiah DeGuara, Tucker Kraft, a fellow rookie, third round pick. Those are probably going to be kind of the top three guys in some order. We don't really know exactly how that depth chart is going to shake out yet, but it's going to be those three guys in some order, I'm sure. So, yeah, not Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, great athlete, and the opportunity is going to be there for him. I think being the best athlete of the three and being the most physically gifted, and obviously Josiah DeGuara, although he's a returning player, he hasn't really started and hasn't really played a whole lot. So he doesn't really have like a huge leg up in terms of experience, like in-game experience. So I think Luke Musgrave probably will at least be like the number 2 tight end on the depth chart and have a decent role, because a lot of the weapons that the Packers have this year are just rookies and like second-year players. So everybody's kind of going to be figuring some things out this year. And there's not like a lot of established players at all. So there's going to be opportunities available. And I think with Luke Musgrave's talent, he's going to be able to seize a significant role this year. I know rookie tight ends typically don't make a huge impact, and I'm not expecting a huge impact from him, but I just think he's going to have enough opportunities that he will probably be one of, if not the most impactful rookies from this class in year one.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if, he didn't. I mean, who else are you going to line up at tight end? There's really no other options, hardly. So he's going to be getting the majority of the snaps, him or Tucker Kraft. So if you get the majority of the reps, you're kind of expected to make a significant impact. And if you don't, that would be kind of disheartening, even though he is a rookie. But my concern with both of them is they were both quite injured in college, especially Musgrave. So I really hope that if he can just stay healthy in the NFL, and maybe the Packers trainers can work on that. But he's really struggled with health in college and missed a great portion of last year. Tucker as well. But seems like so far so good in camp. They've both been healthy. They've both been playing a lot, getting reps with the first team. But yeah, that's my one concern is once we get to games, people hitting each other, preseason, regular season, can they stay healthy going over the middle? Because that's a position that does get hurt a lot and does get hit a lot. We saw what happened with Jermichael Finley. That was really unfortunate and kind of changed the whole trajectory of the Packers tight end position after that. They just never rebounded or replaced him, kind of like safety Nick Collins. So, that's a position that we really need health from. Robert Tonyan, again, another guy that looked good 1 year and then kind of fell off after that with the injury. So if they can stay healthy, high expectations as well. But can they do it? They just got to go prove it now.
Mm-hmm. We just talked about who we think will be the most impactful rookie this year, but let's talk about the rookie class as a whole. What are your expectations for this group this year in 2023? And how many, I guess if you had to guess, how many rookies do you think will start this year or make a significant impact of the 13?
Yeah, my expectations are probably a little lower this year just based on a lot of these guys being depth options. Even in the second round, Jaden Reed, not probably expected to start, maybe in the slot, but not going to be the number 2 guy or anything like that. Could be number 3. The tight ends obviously will come in and make an impact. I would be shocked if that didn't happen The kicker is the kicker. But a lot of these guys were drafted to be backups, like Sean Clifford and some of the D linemen or edge rushers, if you want to argue. Some of those guys were basically coming in for depth options, and they're not really expected to start. Even the later picks, other than the kicker, they're probably not going to. I would be pretty shocked. So, my expectations aren't super high for them, but even as depth options, I think they can for sure make an impact. There's only like a handful that I really see being, really that could really start this year, I suppose. You've got Musgrave, Kraft. Those are kind of the obvious ones. Anders Carlson, number 3. So I think those are the only 3 that I kind of expect to make or a big impact and start. I would be very, very shocked if really any of the other ones started. I mean, I guess you could say Lucas Van Ness as well because of the injury he could be starting. Now, would he actually be starting if he was...
The whole year, yeah.
Yeah, would he be starting the whole year? Probably not, assuming that Rashawn Gary gets back at some point. But, I think of the whole class, which was a big class this year, I only expect those 3 to really start the full season. The rest are mostly depth to, fringe starters. So it's really hard to say, they didn't draft guys this year to really come in and start. It'd be nice if they did sometimes, but this year definitely not, especially at safety. They just really shied away from that position until the 7th round. So I just don't really see a lot of these guys, the majority of the class, really contributing right away or really throughout the season. Probably more guys that they save for next year, long term, as we get into that closer to that 2025 free agency, where a lot of guys are up for a contract, and they'll only be going into their 3rd season at that point. So I feel like a lot of these picks were for the future. If we decide, hey, we don't want to re-sign these guys next year or in 2025 when a lot of the big contracts are up, I almost feel like it was sort of a security blanket, other than tight end. Tight end was definitely drafting for need. There's no debating that. It wasn't like, and you could say receiver a little bit too was a need. But the other positions, like, we didn't need a ton more defensive linemen. We didn't really need a 3rd string quarterback. We didn't need, a 3rd running back. It was kind of just a want or a depth option for a lot of these positions. Even, Carrington Ballantyne, he wasn't really a want. It was kind of, or I shouldn't say need. It was definitely a want at cornerback. So I just don't have super high expectations like I have had in years past, where it's like, okay, I think these guys could come in and contribute day one. Not that it's a bad class or it's disappointing. It's just these guys are, almost felt a little bit like a carbon copy of last year, because we drafted 3 wide receivers last year. We draft 3 wide receivers this year again. Draft an edge rusher last year, get an edge rusher this year. We didn't go tight end last year, but it just felt like a lot of similar picks, and we go defensive line both years as well. So it almost kind of felt like we're doing like another very similar draft, even though it was a whole different class, but it just felt very, very much the same strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree on a lot of those points you just made. I think there's probably going to be like maybe 3 or 4 rookies that eventually like are consistent starters this season as it goes along. And obviously Anders Carlson is probably the easiest projection for one of those roles, or one of those rookies that starts pretty much all year. I think one of the rookie tight ends, at least, probably Luke Musgrave, but maybe Tucker Kraft will at least be like a co-starter at some point during the season. And then probably one of the rookie receivers as well, I think works up to like the number 3 slot on the depth chart, whether that's Jaden Reed or maybe Dontavian Wicks. I think we'll probably have a rookie receiver, a tight end, and the kicker starting. But like looking at the rest of their first round picks, other than Lucas Van Ness, who's probably going to start early in the season with Gary out, I don't know if he's going to start all year. I think it's just going to be a few of the rookies really starting or making a significant impact this season. But getting into our next topic here, let's talk about bounce back seasons. Which Packers player needs a bounce back season the most in your mind?
I had a tough one. I kind of some guys that haven't been talked about a ton, but I was looking at Sean Ryan, the third round pick from last year. He really didn't do a ton last year with the injury and then getting suspended, I think, for the last 10 games, I believe it was. So he just really, it was either 8 or 10, I can't remember exactly, but he was, basically an extreme disappointment, basically the opposite of Zach Tom for a hit from his standpoint. I think he needs to come back and have a better year just so he stays on the roster. Not necessarily plays a lot, but at least stays on the roster for his sake. But for the Packers' sake, I definitely think Darnell Savage by far. We need leadership at the safety position. He's basically the only veteran leader that has been on the Packers for multiple years. So I kind of feel like he needs to step up and help them because they don't have any help really at safety. It's a lot of unproven veterans or, a lot of rookies or young players that are kind of hoping to be boom or bust in some fashion. Waiting until the 7th round to address safety. Hopefully that's okay. It seemed like a little bit of a stretch to wait that long, but they might have gotten a good one. So I think Darnell Savage, though, definitely there's so much pressure on him this 5th year. They need him to play well. He needs to play well if he wants a second contract, or for any other player or other team, I should say, that would want to sign him. If he has a really poor year again, he's probably not going to be getting much more than a 1 or 2 year contract with another team. I would be very shocked if anyone was like, oh, hey, here's a 3-year contract for playing bad again 2 years in a row. I think that he might sit on the free agent market for a while. So he really needs to play well for himself, and the Packers really need him desperately bad because he's not just a depth option at all. He never really has been. He's always been a starter, so they need him as a starter to play well in that role, and they really can't even afford to bench him this year. Like last year, they put in Rudy Ford, and it worked out okay until Ford started getting burned a lot in coverage. So they don't really have that option this year of saying, oh, hey, we're going to throw you on the bench for a few games and have somebody else come in. I mean, I like Jonathan Owens and some of the other free agents, but I just don't think that they're necessarily quality starters. They were starters at other teams to various more as well, but they're not quality starters. So it's got to be Savage. I think it'd be hard to convince me any other way because he is such a big part of the team. And if he plays poorly in the secondary, we give up big runs and we also give up big pass plays. And we saw his tackling last year left a lot to be desired. So, for me, there's really no one else that needs a bounce back year other than him. Not nearly as bad. So you could maybe argue a little bit Kenny Clark didn't play as well as he should have last year as well. He could play better this year, but Darnell Savage really struggled last year and then ended up getting benched. So that was pretty disappointing. And glad he's still on the team because if without him, we'd be really, really in a bad position. But he needs to play up to his first round billing and earn that second contract.
Yeah, I definitely think Darnell Savage is a prime bounce back candidate for sure. I might agree with you that he's the player like most in need of a bounce back season, but I'm going to go a different direction, and I'm going to go with Eric Stokes. As a rookie, he really impressed me. He was significantly better than I was expecting, and he really showed his potential against the Seattle Seahawks. I don't remember which week it was, but basically shutting down Tyler Lockett in one-on-one coverage really showed me his potential, and I think all season long, he was kind of up and down being a rookie, but he had a lot of high points like that game against the Seattle Seahawks. But then last year, just got picked on a lot, really was not consistent at all. Then at the end of the season, he suffers the foot injury, sidelined for the rest of the year. And obviously he's on the mend from that now, coming into the offseason, starting off on the physically unable to perform list. So we don't know exactly when we'll see him this year. So he's got a lot to live up to. After showing some promise as a rookie, then really struggling as a sophomore, had kind of a sophomore slump. So a lot to prove still for Stokes, and being a former first-round pick, number 29 overall, I believe, still has to live up to that potential. So he's another, I think, prime bounce-back candidate as well. And I would say also, like, an honorable mention, Devondre Campbell is another big one on defense. Really struggled last year after being like an all-pro caliber player kind of out of nowhere a couple seasons ago. So he's another one that really needs to bounce back if the Packers defense is going to live up to its potential.
Yeah, I agree with those. And I'm excited to see Eric Stokes again this year. I was at the Packers training camp practice, and he was off to the side looking, or I shouldn't say looking, he was running with Rashawn Gary, and they kind of are both, seems like around the same rehab time. Looks like they'll both be probably not active for the opening day, but it seems like at some point they'll both be back, and at least they're, back in uniform and at least doing some physical activity. They're not just sitting on the sidelines in crutches or something. So really good to see both of them back on the field in some capacity, and hopefully they can both come back better than they did before, or at least close to that. But yeah, I agree. Devondre Campbell, really disappointing after giving him a pretty nice contract. We need him to play a little bit better too in the middle linebacker position, because the run defense was really bad there for a while. And it wasn't just Darnell Savage, his fault that they were bad at. One player, can make or break a play, but usually not the entire game. So we need, better play out of other positions that are affecting the run. So yeah, Devondre Campbell, that's another sneaky pick that could be really a good bounce back position, or bounce back player, because he's so impactful when he's on, and like he was in 2021. But last year we just didn't see that, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like every year a UDFA makes the team, a UDFA rookie. Obviously, the Packers have had some really good ones in the years past, like Tramon Williams and Sam Shields, for example. Who do you think from this year's team will make the roster? If you had to pick one undrafted rookie, I know we haven't seen the preseason games yet, but we've heard some reports from camp and maybe seen some college film of some of these guys. So I guess if you had to pick one right now, like, which undrafted rookie do you think makes this team?
Well, I'm kind of going to go with the flashy, easy pick, but Brenton Cox Jr. Out of Florida. He played for Georgia, got kicked off the team. So obviously he's got some talent if he could be on the Bulldogs roster, and then also play for Florida too, and then ended up getting kicked off that team as well. So there's obviously character concerns, and just hoping that he can ground himself a little bit more and not have these character concerns come up in the NFL as well. But when he is on, he's really good, and he's got great size. He could probably play either inside linebacker or edge rusher. He's 6'4", 250. So he's got some definitely good size to play either position. I guess you can never have too many edge rushers. We kind of already have 5 pretty good ones. So I would prefer him probably to be more of an inside linebacker depth. But he's really good. At least in college, he was really good and fell out of the draft mainly because of the character concerns. But he, enjoyed a pretty good career in college at Georgia, and then was having a good year at Florida before getting kicked out. So if he could just stay on the team and not, have all these issues off the field, this would be great. And I know Packers.com, they're kind of talking about him at inside linebacker, but he almost seems a tad bit big for inside linebacker. But, that's kind of how they used to be, middle linebackers or, 6'2", 6'3", 250. He kind of fits that old style of, middle linebacker. So, I wouldn't be disappointed if he played edge or inside linebacker. Probably better just for our depth wise if he goes to inside. But I think he can definitely be somewhat impactful even this year as an undrafted rookie. in a normal year, if he was not, have all these off-field issues, I definitely think he's probably drafted at least in the third, fourth, fifth round, somewhere around there. But since, all these things are going on, him getting kicked off multiple teams in college, which you usually don't see, usually it's just one, if any, that definitely shot him down draft boards. And not because of his talent. His talent is there. And I think it's showing up a little bit in practice. But, just take care of the stuff off the field, too. You got to be a good person, too. You can't just be a good football player. That's definitely a big part of it. But, glad the Packers were willing to give him I guess you could almost argue, a third chance, to make a team. And, they're willing to work with him. And hopefully, him and Quay Walker as well can, temper get their tempers under control and not be a huge distraction and get suspended from games. So, yeah, I think he's definitely the guy that, for me, I feel like he's a lock to make the team. I would be shocked because if he doesn't make the team, I think somebody's picking him up. So he's my guy that's pretty much got to make this team. Otherwise, he's definitely not coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said it. The talent is there. The opportunity is definitely there. But will he put it all together and make the team? I think he might, but still some time to go before that's decided. My pick for that personally, my pick for which UDFA makes the team is Malik Heath, the wide receiver from Ole Miss. I just think the opportunity is there. The talent is there as well with him. Obviously, the Packers receiver room is basically all rookies and second-year players, and he's part of that group. He's in the same boat as them. Obviously, not a draft pick like some of those other guys, but fighting for like the bottom spots of the depth chart, 4, 5, or 6 slot on the depth chart. I think he's got an opportunity to stick in like a lower role on the depth chart. I don't expect him to start at all. I don't think he's going to be like the number 3 receiver or anything. I know that job is kind of wide open. Like looking at the top of the depth chart, I'm pretty sure Christian Watson's number 1, Romeo Doubs is number 2. But then after that, a lot of spots are unsettled. And I think that could work to Malik Heath's advantage. I think he could definitely nab one of those spots near the bottom of the depth chart and stick on this team as a rookie undrafted free agent. But now getting into our next topic here, you kind of touched on it a little bit when you're talking about Darnell Savage as the bounce back candidate, but what are your thoughts of this safety situation? What do you make of it? Last year, obviously, we saw Savage get benched late in the year for Rudy Ford. Adrian Amos is no longer on the team. Just the position just isn't really settled. It's not proven. I don't know if they really have any good options there. What do you make of that situation right now? And who do you think will start?
Yeah, it's such a tough position to really assess. It feels like they have a lot of depth on the roster at safety. They just don't have any starters hardly, or quality starters, I should say, on the roster. It's just kind of, they just have guys right now, and that's really frustrating. You kind of want to at least have your starters at that position kind of at least, for like a formality of what it will look like in the season. I mean, you've got Rudy Ford, who is pretty much, I guess, projected to be the starter, but he was sort of a boomer bust safety last year. Had some really awesome interceptions and last year, and really had that great game against Dallas. But then also, had games where he gave up some long touchdowns and was a liability in coverage. So is he a starter? I guess, but he's not really a quality starter. Ennis Gaines, he's been on the team for a few years as well. Guy out of TCU, seemed like more of a practice squad guy, more of a guy that's going to be playing a lot in the preseason. So usually plays okay in the preseason typically, but doesn't really get a lot of game reps and doesn't seem like a guy that's probably going to make the opening day roster as the top 53, 54. So seems like another practice squad guy. Anthony Johnson Jr., the rookie out of Iowa State, the 7th rounder. A lot of people had him going earlier in the draft, and they said that he's sort of a steal or at least a good value in the 7th round. He could make at least a push for a starter. like I said, there's really no concrete guys other than Darnell Savage, and he didn't play well last year. So Anthony Johnson Jr., it would be great to see him step up, and he's got the size and length. He's 6', 205, definitely got the size, and he's actually a little bit bigger than some of the other guys. So really excited for him and his potential as a late round pick, but at least a value pick at that position. You have Dallin Levitt. He's just a special teams guy. Unfortunately, we have a few of those on the team. Tavarius Moore, played a lot. I shouldn't say played a lot, but played with the 49ers and is another great special teams player. So he could probably be a spot starter if you needed him, just based on he has 6 years of experience already. Jonathan Owens, he's gotten some run with the first group in practice and at family night because of the injury to Rudy Ford, and they just held him out for precautionary reasons. But I did like that signing a lot in the offseason. I think he started every single game for the Texans last year. So I know the Texans were pretty bad last year. They were the second worst team, but he's still an NFL starter at some level, and I feel at least somewhat okay if he has to step in and play a lot of snaps. Hopefully not starting the whole year like last year, but if he's he's at least the number 3 safety, I think that would be okay. We've got Benny Sapp, the third, an undrafted rookie with some heritage in the NFL. And then obviously Savage, which we talked about quite a bit earlier. So, yeah, it's like outside of Savage, it's just very unknown. And, we did see some Rudy Ford last year, but he was, I think, mostly a special teams guy. That's what he was brought in for. He wasn't really brought in to be a starter at safety. And I guess this year they kind of see him as being able to take on that role. I don't feel very confident about that, but we don't really have much choice.
Yeah, I think I see the safety situation pretty similarly. If I had to guess right now who the week 1 starters are, I think I would go with Darnell Savage and Rudy Ford. But I could see some other guys usurping one of their spots, like Anthony Johnson Jr., like you mentioned, or Jonathan Owens maybe, or Tavarius Moore possibly. But yeah, just a very unsettled position overall, and might kind of make or break the Packers defense this year, depending on how those guys play. So that's going to be one of the biggest storylines, I think, to watch for the Packers this season. But now I'm going to actually call an audible and switch up the order of our last few topics here, because I just realized that the first question I have, or the next question I have, kind of spoils the other two. So it would make more sense to say that one, to talk about that one last. But let's start with what will it take for the Packers to make the playoffs this season?
I think obviously an improvement on the defensive side for sure. We saw the defense was terrible in the beginning of the year last year. They can't have a similar start if they want to make the playoffs this year. There's no way. You can't just give up that many points and expect the offense to make up the rest. So it has to be the defense. It has to be better all around, even though we made very little changes on defense other than the draft and just letting players go in free agency, like, Dean Lowry and Jerron Reed and, all those guys. We let a lot of guys go, and Amos. But maybe they see it as addition by subtraction, and that somehow makes the defense better, even though we didn't really add a ton to it. And we still have the same defensive coordinator we had last year. So the defense got to play better, and then Jordan Love's just got to play at least serviceable. He has to be, a little less of a gunslinger than even Rodgers was at the end of the year, where he was sort of making some desperation heaves, especially in the Lions game to Alan Lazard. That was not the way I wanted his career to end with the Packers. So if he can just avoid doing that and forcing balls in like Rodgers would occasionally, like basically forcing every ball to Devontae Adams that he could, not have I just don't like having a favorite receiver. So if he can avoid doing that and actually just throwing to the guy that's open and not just the guy that he likes, I think he can be pretty efficient and possibly be pretty good. So if he can be at least efficient, the defense can play at least average, they definitely should be a playoff contender.
Yeah, I think in terms of win total, I think it's going to be probably 10, but definitely at least 9 to for sure make the playoffs. But other in terms of like who needs to step up and like which units need to perform well, obviously Jordan Love, that's going to play a big part in determining how far the Packers can go this year. If he can be at least solid, like a mid-tier quarterback, I think they would have a chance to make the playoffs as long as their defense isn't horrible. If the defense isn't a train wreck and Jordan Love is solid, I think they would have a shot to make the playoffs. But a lot of uncertainty on the defense. Can you trust Joe Barry to get the most out of this group? And Rashawn Gary's not going to be there at the start of the season. Eric Stokes as well on the mend, on the physically unable to perform list. So a lot of question marks defensively, and the safety situation, as we talked about, another area for concern there. But I think if Jordan Love steps up, the defense is solid. And I also think the young weapons, the young receivers are gonna need to mature pretty quickly. That's another
Yes.
big thing, because if they're just running the wrong routes and dropping passes because they're inexperienced, like the Packers, they're gonna struggle to win games if they don't mature quickly. So I think all of those things are gonna play a part in determining how far the Packers can go this year.
Yeah, it's going to be probably the most interesting year since I would say Favre left and Rodgers took over in '08. That was like I just remember that year was extremely uncertain. It was like, oh, well, Rodgers looked good against Dallas, but is that really him, or is that just him coming in for half a game and playing well? What is that? What is he really? Because Favre was like the golden child in Green Bay, and Rodgers not necessarily, hated by the fans, but probably not as beloved overall as Favre was, because he was kind of the first one to really bring the titles back to Green Bay. So Rodgers is kind of seen as the guy that just kind of kept that going. So it feels a lot like that, where it's like, okay, we're kind of back to '08, where we're getting rid of us. We're trading away a starter at quarterback that was very good for a very long time for a guy that has not started a game, or he has started one game, started only one game, and played in a few others, but hasn't shown a ton outside of the Philadelphia game a little bit. But it's very. It'll be interesting to see how much he plays in preseason too, because we don't want to get him hurt for the regular season. So, but he needs as many snaps as he can get. So, there is so much uncertainty about this year. But I think they can be a playoff contender. The team's only 2 years removed from being in the playoffs, number one seed. So, you can't tell me they've fallen off that fast.
Yeah, and is Joe Barry gonna line up our cornerbacks 10 yards off the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 3 all year? Because that's gonna determine how many games we win, probably in part. But following up our previous topic, I guess just straight up, point blank, do you think the Packers will make the playoffs this season?
Oh, that's such a hard question, because I feel like they're just gonna miss it. But the NFC is pretty wide open still, so I'm going to say yes. I know a lot of people are saying no, and they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFC. But if they're at least close to what I predict, there's no reason they shouldn't miss it, especially now we have 7 teams, and you have 17 weeks to get that record up and really prove yourself. You have an extra week to help yourself, and you have an extra seed in the playoffs. So there's no reason they can't be in the top 7 of 16 teams in the conference. So I'm going to say yes. And the NFC North is pretty weak as well. I know people are really high on Detroit, but they haven't proven anything yet. They've got some hype, but that's just all it is, really. And until they actually prove to me that they can win the division and make the playoffs, I kind of don't give them the benefit of the doubt yet. So they're still the Lions to me. So I think a lot of people are underappreciating the Packers this season, and I think they're in for a rude awakening, because I think they will be a playoff team. Not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl, but I think they could, be, similar to the '09 Packers, where it was Rodgers' second year, and they, got in as a 5th seed. Hopefully not as bad as the '08 Packers, where the first year Rodgers took over and they were 6-10. It'd be really disappointing if they were 6-11. With Love, I think that would not rub fans the right way necessarily, but I think they might understand because it is his first year. But then they definitely would not be a playoff team. They would probably be a top 10 pick team.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see a path to the Packers making the playoffs this year, but I'm going to say that they don't make it just to try to be realistic and objective. I just think there's probably too many obstacles for them to overcome this year to make the playoffs. Just with how inexperienced their quarterback is, their weapons on offense, and the injuries on defense and the inconsistency of the defense. I just think they're going to have a hard time winning like 10 games this year, which I think they would need to make the playoffs. But lastly, let's just talk about record predictions. Wrap up here. What do you think the Packers ultimately finish here, record-wise in 2023? I'm going to go with 7-10. I'll just put that out there right now. I think they just missed the playoffs. But what is your opinion on that?
I think they probably start off a little slow, but then I think, especially the defense, always seems to come together late in the year. They seem to kind of finish off the year strong. If they could just do that the whole year, it'd be great. But assuming that happens again, I could see them probably 11-6, I think, and that would definitely get them into the playoffs, I would think. The NFC is very weak. Their schedule isn't extremely daunting. They have some weird things like, a lot of away games and like a whole month where they don't play at home. But I think they could win as many as 11 games. That's not like a ton of games necessarily. They're kind of used to winning 13 games a year, so that's kind of a step back from that. But I didn't have, like I said, if you'd asked me this question last year, I would have probably said 4 wins, maybe less. Just that I just had no faith in Jordan Love. I had no faith in the defense. No, Jordan Love looked really good in the one appearance he had last year, and the defense looked a lot better towards the end of the season. So if they can keep up that momentum with both of them, I don't see a reason why they shouldn't be able to win 11 games. The NFC North is not strong. The NFC in general isn't strong. Yeah, they've got to play some, harder games on the AFC side, but, I don't see that being extremely, extremely hard. I mean, yeah, they got to play Kansas City, they got to play Los Angeles, the Chargers, that is, and that's a really tough division. But other than that, it's like, well, a lot of these other teams aren't that great. I mean, Tampa Bay is without Tom Brady. Steelers a little, unknown still. The Broncos were pretty bad last year. It's really unknown if they're back. The Raiders, still the Raiders. It's hard to really think that they're on the fast track. Falcons another rebuilding team, so there's not a lot of like games where you're like, whoa, there's no way they have even a chance at beating them, maybe other than the Kansas City and San Diego game or Los Angeles Chargers game. There's not a lot where you're like, whoa, this is like totally unwinnable. I mean, even the Rams, it's like, well, they're kind of coming off a pretty bad year as well. So the Saints, they're not really that great either. So I don't see a reason why they couldn't win 10 to 11 games. So I'm going to stick with 11. I think that's it was a little optimistic, but I think they could live up to it. And a lot of the players seem bought in. They seem like, hey, this team can be just as good as they were last year, if not better. So if they're better, then they should be able to get to 11 wins. And those are a lot of good reasons why, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just kind of thinking some of the same things. I do think the Packers are going to be competitive in pretty much every game they play this year. Most of the games don't look unwinnable, besides like the Chiefs and maybe the Chargers, like you said. So I think there's going to be a lot of one-score games probably, and that can go like one of two ways. You could be like in one-score games all season and finish like 4-13, or you can, if you win those games, then you could be 11-6, like you said. So it just depends if they can finish close games like that. I think that'll play a big part in determining if they are a playoff team or not, is if they can finish those close games. But those are all the topics that we had today. I don't know if you have anything, any socials to plug or anything before we sign off, but I just want to give you an opportunity to do that if you have anything that you want to promote, I guess, before we sign off.
No, not really. Just glad to get back on having the podcast with you again, and excited for this season. It's really felt like a long off season, and I almost am like thinking like, wow, it's going to be weird in about a month. We're going to have football again, and it's like, wow, the Sundays and the Saturdays will be very busy again. And I've almost gotten so used to them not being busy because it's, the off season's pretty long in football. So it's like, whoa, okay, I'm going to have to plan my weekends a little better because I have stuff to watch now and stuff to really pay attention to versus on the weekends, like, whatever. It's summer, it's fun, and you can watch baseball whenever. But the plans don't have to be as solid, and you don't have to try to plan around a Packer or Badger game. So it's kind of easier to just kind of wing it on the weekend. But pretty soon we won't have that option. It will be. Otherwise, you're going to miss the game. So it's going to be quite an interest. And especially this year, there's so much intrigue. It's not like just another Aaron Rodgers year where it's like, okay, they're going to be good. It's going to be a solid team. You expect them to make the playoffs. This year, there's just so much unknown. So you really want to pay attention this year. It's not your typical year. And, I've definitely missed, football and excited for it to come back. And it's, we only have 3 preseason games now to look at the team, and then there's that, I think, 2-week break in between. So then it's like we're going to have some football, not really great quality football, but we'll have some football, have a 2-week break, and then we'll get back to it. So, it's going to be just I think it's going to be a really fun season, and just kind of know what we have at the quarterback position will be really fun to follow that journey.
Yeah, I guess for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Dan_Wuso. You can also read some of my work at the Packers Wire and also on my website, pigskinprodigies.wordpress.com. I haven't really been writing on there lately, but I am thinking about starting that back up. So you could check that out and see if I post anything in the next few months, because I was thinking about maybe getting back into some of the NFL draft content that I had done for years and years prior to last year. So that could be something to look forward to possibly. But yeah, just thank you, viewers, for watching and listening. And thank you, Kevin, for joining me again to talk some Packers. It's always a great time talking NFL, talking Packers with you. And yeah, just hopefully everyone will tune in the future. I think we want to keep this going, maybe do another episode after week 1 of the preseason is done. So hopefully more episodes to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to keep doing this, and it doesn't feel like work. That's the great thing. It definitely feels like just having a conversation, having fun. So definitely always great talking sports with you as well, and looking forward to hopefully a great season.